Hey, so it's been a few days since I streamed. Actually, like a week and a half. But yeah, art stream. Yeah. I am using this app that does vector art now, so that's neat. I won't have to worry about all my weird squigglies since it'll always be a curve or a line or you know what I mean. But yeah, let's stop doing the wabumbo and start doing the fun. So let's get chat here to where I can see it easy. Oh yeah, I accidentally opened Vegas. Let's close the intro thing. So yeah, we're here. I'm using Inkscape now. So that's fun. Very fun. One sec. There we go. Yeah, so yeah, well fun. Let's try to find something to watch, shall we? Um Something to watch. Hmm. Let's watch Quite. Quite's fun.
Guys, I'm not gonna lie. I am so rich. I have so much money, and I am better than you because I have money. Unfortunately, I am not born the child of a billionaire rich. So by my
let's
logic,
turn that
they
down
are better
so
than
it's
me.
not
And
drowning
let's
me
let
out.
cope with inferiority, then
Alright,
don't
there we
sit
go.
and laugh. Hi
Actually,
again,
let's
you.
turn it up a
Welcome
little
back
bit.
to a worrying pattern of behavior
There
you're
we
seeing
go.
in one of your close friends. TikTok is a place
And
for everybody,
so,
and it's too
yeah.
bad because that really means
We are
everybody,
going to
including the people
be
who have
doing
way
art
more shit
today.
than you, like me, except even more than that. So today I wanted to take a look at some of the most expensive shit to ever be
I
recorded
quite
on an
enjoy
iPhone
doing
7.
these
But
art
before we do
streams.
that, did you know subscribing with notifications
I'm
on
trying
makes
to
you
learn
rich?
to
Half of you
draw.
watching right now aren't subscribed, which is a
So, yeah.
terrible business decision because while subscribing
But,
won't give you
okay,
wealth, it will
so
give you
I
health
have some
because it won't tell you where you
ideas.
stand.
First idea I have is, well, first of all, I'm
In
going
that
to
first clip,
be
I really thought she was
splitting
going to
my
come out from the
things.
curtain way higher up. With the perspective she gave us, it looks like she's walking around in a life-size dollhouse. That second one, though, I don't even know what to say. It looks like if you took Donald Trump's apartment, which itself looks like what would happen if someone who had the Midas touch, but only on their poop, took a massive diarrhea spray on every room in that penthouse, and you just turned it into a full-size mansion in rural Idaho.
I am so sorry to my neighbors. I am so sorry. I really don't mean this. I'm sorry. I just have to do it every time. I'm really sorry in advance. I don't mean this in any bad way. I'm not trying to do it on purpose. It just kind of has to happen, but hopefully you guys can forgive me.
I'm sorry, man. We can't be friends. You had to stick the key
so
in the
the
ignition of
things
that
I'm
car.
gonna
Are you
do
bored? Is this a joke to you? Do you
is,
not take this being rich stuff seriously?
I'm
Melt down
going
that car for
to
scrap metal and get
still do
yourself
the
something that you
shirt,
don't have to simulate sex on to get
hood
started.
and stuff.
Woo!
I'm thirsty.
Yeah, still gonna have the shirt and the hoodie, but for now, I want to focus on doing a little nightmare duck there. It's a lot of stairs.
Yeah,
Oh no, I finished my water and I'm still thirsty, but my house is the size of a cod map.
yeah.
Let me show you how many miles I had
This
to run just to get some
is
water. It's
keeping
really
all
hard.
my
Listen, what
attention,
you
so
do is
let's
easy, kid. For me to get the only sterile source of
turn it
tap
to
water in my
something
area, I have
less
to
distra-
convince my cat to pee in a cup.
Kappa.
It's not fun.
That's good.
Obviously, his actions are. So, this one
Okay,
was something else. You
so,
feel like a beast
what I'm
that
planning to
rose
do.
from the depths of Tartarus itself, with no purpose in life but to raise its surroundings, ruining lives it couldn't possibly comprehend before descending back into its desolate home of ash and decay, taking part of my soul with it.
Shut up.
There's room for improvement, is what I'm trying to
John
say.
Hetty?
Welcome back to my book club, because apparently I've run out of things to do. Hence the get up that I'm
Work in
wearing.
progress.
How much of
But
this
for
is
now,
for a bit, and how much of this is just my
I'm
fashion?
gonna be working on.
Steal his look. $5 for the glasses. Steal the
I'm
ring.
gonna be working on Doug.
And buy my merch. The best place to start is with the start, as in the front of the book. Now, I didn't buy a physical copy this time, since I couldn't
Doug.
find a second-hand copy, or a copy. Most likely because no one in Australia bothered to import the thing, and buying it new was 3 times more expensive
There you
than
go.
buying the Kindle
Doug.
version.
But
Price
I
of
have a little
astonishing
idea.
12 whole Australian dollars. Also, the Kindle version gives less money to Greg, so I will be using a copy of Dante's Inferno in its stead. I'm holding it upside down. So when you see this, pretend that I
Snake.
am reading Onision's book.
We're gonna be having
Why
a snake.
did I pick a book that explicitly
More
details the
specifically,
deluge of pain and torture and hell?
For duck version,
That's
we're
called
gonna have
subtlety,
just
Greg. You could learn
normal
a thing or
snake.
two. But you know what
But
isn't
for
a deluge
soda
of pain
version-
and torture?
We're gonna have a naga.
Today's sponsor.
We're gonna have a
It's
naga.
so much better than a
And
normal
if you don't know
one
what a
that
naga
listing the
is,
benefits
it's
seems
basically
kind
a
of little
snake
unfair.
person.
Benefits like its
Let's look up
premium build
naga.
materials such as aluminum, titanium, and carbon fiber. The fact it's compact but still easy to access. No more fumbling around with your grotty, disgusting fake leather wallet. This
Yeah.
bad boy holds so many cards.
These
hot
kinds of
damn, Not just
things.
cards.
These
Holds
are
money really well.
nagas.
Like way better than I was
Except
expecting.
I'm gonna
As
take
in,
more of this
stapling money
approach
to it
than
would probably be less
this
effective.
approach.
You know it's a good wallet. Why not
But
buy
yeah.
one? Thousands of people agree
So
that it's worth the
that's-
price,
that's
especially
the idea
considering
that I
it's a
have
lifetime
for
warranty. With
this,
free
so
shipping
let's
and
just
10% off if you use the code KAPPA using the link below.
clear
So
all
get on it,
this.
hot stuff. As you may remember from my last video, the cover of
So.
Onision's second book had a low-res JPEG of Greg doing his best worst Jack Skellington cosplay, and Stones to Abigail had Stones, and presumably Abigail would know, haven't read it. Reaper's Creek, on the other hand, is prefaced by a picture of stuff Greg just had in his house, making it genuinely difficult to comprehend at times. It took me a few minutes to realize that this was actual writing. Not to
There.
mention the strange hole cut in the picture that has a singular L in a different marker, which may actually draw you away from noticing that the title is written on scraps that is used to package blue tack. I should also read this paragraph down here, but Greg should have written a book, not fan fiction, so it seems that both of us are doing whatever we want right now. As a brief introduction, this collection of words follows Daniel, a young child / teenager who gets he gets powers of some kind, which causes stuff to happen. You may wonder already if Daniel is just another self-insert, as was the case with Greg's second book, and possibly Greg's first book. And yes, and also it's more noticeable, because for some reason, there are times characters call the protagonist Greg, as in how people refer to the author. Greg. The name is supposed to be Daniel, but the first time someone calls to him, they use the name Greg, which just completely threw me off entirely at the start, even though it only happens 3 times in the book, and even more so since Daniel is or was part of Greg's real-life name. So not only is the main character named after the author, it is occasionally replaced accidentally with the rest of the author's name. And if that's not bad enough, apparently his first book has the protagonist named James, as in Greg's middle name. Was this supposed to symbolize some unique relationship between the author and the protagonist? Or was it just lazy? The book actually starts with a foreword, basically trying to justify the weirdness of it, while also making the book seem like it's saying more than it is in classic Onision style. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because when he references his first book, he misspells it. Twice. Which is such a pathetic mistake, I have to double check every time I proofread this script that yes, Greg does in fact fuck up the name of his own book. Twice. Chapter 1 serves as our introduction to our main character and cast. Now, I'm not saying everyone except for the self-insert is unimportant and bland, but I'm mainly going to be ignoring them, and you're not going to notice. This chapter sets out to explain in no uncertain terms that Daniel is, in fact, a smart little boy who's just so amazing in everything. It begs the question if Greg even tried to hide it this time around. This chapter includes such highlights as: the problem with friends is they aren't bound to you by blood. There is no promise they will never go away. Spoken like an 11-year-old, which is what Daniel is. The chapter continues with Daniel going up a hill to play, bashing on Christianity again because it's Greg, knocking himself out, immediately waking up, realizing he's injured, then going to the bathroom, compressing his wound. What wound is this from? How did his t-shirt get ripped? Go fuck yourself, I guess? But yes, Daniel retreats, having lost the first bout with nature, and performs first aid on himself, while relishing in his razor-sharp jawline and attractive, tall stature. I won't spoil how tall because he does explicitly say it later, and I've laughed reading books before, but this is the first time I laughed at a book, like a mean-spirited laughter. In short, this chapter ends with him pouring hydrogen peroxide on his wound, which is his, and I'm quoting here, favorite part, implying he's done this before, at age 11. He then finishes off his day by playing Metal Gear Solid. Great game, which was unwittingly programming his worldview, except it isn't, because Daniel's actions and worldview do not correlate to the ideologies portrayed in Metal Gear Solid, even remotely. Metal Gear Solid is an extremely political game. You could have just said I was playing Bubsy. I wouldn't have noticed. I would have let it slide. But no, he had to get all fancy with it and bring in politics for no reason. I should point out now, this is written as the current thoughts at the time. This isn't like a Great Gatsby kind of situation where he's 11 years old and then he grew up and retroactively he has this new profound view on these things. He's 11. He's 11 and he's saying these things. What a dork, which is my official rating for this chapter.
There we go.
What a dork out of 10. You know what else is crazy about this chapter? Is when I was reading it, only 45% of you watching are subscribed to my channel. So why don't you hit that bell icon and support the channel?
Okay, so
If you want to. If you like how this
Got the
video turns
beat.
out, why not subscribe? I worked pretty hard on it. This part is being added well after the final draft, and I cannot find a good entry point, so I'm just putting it here. Sorry. This is basically a repeat of last chapter, reinforcing the fact that Daniel is, and I'm quoting here,
there we go.
really smart and super attractive. Okay, that wasn't a quote, but you get the point. While also morally superior than everyone else, because the rest of the cast reads like Sunday cartoon villains on PCP. Also, aliens happen. This chapter follows Daniel and his sister walking up the street to his uncle's bonfire party, which they are allowed to do because they don't live near anyone else, so the streets are safe, and because his mother is not an irresponsible cretin. I'm aware this is probably supposed to be some kind of dramatic irony, or some terminology like that, but it's almost impossible to read it that way unless you understand Greg can't actually write dramatic irony, or write at all, because dramatic irony rarely works when the main character is never wrong about anything. So I'm choosing to think of this as a poorly executed story element, rather than thinking of it as shamefully short-sighted, since not long after this, his mother continues to be the exact same neglectful parent, but suddenly, Daniel understands that, with no revelation between him liking his mother and not. It just happens. Is it supposed to be sarcastic? He's like 11. How am I supposed to be reading this? Either way, he's completely forgettable family members trying to pressure him, again, an 11-year-old, to drink whiskey, to the point where it's almost a threat. Now, do these types of families exist in the real world? Yes. Are they common? Tricky question. There's a lot of grey area in this situation. Did Greg show a family in that grey area and choose this type of family specifically to accurately depict the struggles of being raised solely dependent on abusive relationships, creating an internal conflict later in life as you struggle to adapt to healthy relationships, causing you to default to surrounding yourself with abusive people because that, at the very least, is familiar? No! The only reason this family exists is because, based off my research, humans are usually born into families, and according to the book, that's what Daniel is. But gosh darn it if Greg isn't going to eke the most bullshit victimhood out of them, with his uncle completely ignoring Daniel's continued efforts to say, "Thanks, man," and just tosses the glass whiskey bottle at a child. A horrific act that perfectly sets up a redemption arc for a character that never appears again. Something, fuck people who drink, followed by a line that reads pretty closely to, if I was your boyfriend, I'll treat you the way you deserve, my queen. But instead of thinking you're superior at holding doors open for women, it's just general moral superiority, because everyone who drinks is an alcoholic, and cheers to that. He goes home, and then aliens. Missing part of the sentence. Repeating part of the previous sentence, so everyone knows that you're paralyzed, and what exactly that word means. You could have just said, I'm paralyzed. The unable to escape was implied. This is what a fly would feel like trapped inside a spider web. Yes, as in paralyzed. Only I couldn't even struggle. Yes, because you're paralyzed. I get it. I was paralyzed physically and yes! Dude, I know what it means. It's fine. Back to the book, Daniel wakes up from his extremely traumatic abduction and assault from an extraterrestrial force and immediately seeks comfort and counsel, trying to understand the situation he's just experienced, which introduces our mentor character in the hero's journey. I'm kidding. He gets annoyed at his mom singing. Dude. This chapter is the first time we see him at school, a location Greg doesn't seem to remember very well, so obviously it's my favorite chapter so far. It just makes no sense. It starts simply by him and his sister meeting his cousin. She's not important, who's a year older, which also is important, and as the bus comes around the corner, it explodes, riddling his cousin in shrapnel, and his sister's screaming in horror. His cousin stumbles around, screaming and spitting blood. But joke's on you. He imagined it. Oh, Greg, will you ever stop spoiling us by writing a book without the main character imagining a horrific event causing the deaths of several children? What's that, you won't? You should. Some of you may recall what I'm referencing from This Is Why I Hate You, where he imagines a bomb or some stuff with metal propulsion devices going off at school, and generally it was less descriptive and horrific than in this book, and surprisingly more justified, since Jack Skellington or whatever the fuck hated everyone. Completely unjustly, but horrifically fucked up people would generally be more likely to imagine horrifically fucked up things, but in Reaper's Creek, he just imagines the most horrendous event I've read in a book and then just moves on like a derailed train covered in butter. I didn't think I would say this in my career, but I think you should further explain the exploding bus full of children. He just L-cancels that sentence into wondering why school's named Ocean View when it's not near the ocean. That was a melee joke, in case you didn't get that L-canceling. Don't worry. It was mad funny. Don't worry. Go to school. Meet Heather. How do you know this word? Daniel's a Giga Chat, even when he's 11. We meet David. His best friend. David is gross. He thinks Daniel's sister is hot. Real-life 11-year-olds are more concerned with cooties than hitting on girls. They watch a documentary. Daniel, of course, is a smart little boy, so he's smarter than the narrator. Go fuck yourself. Daniel sees an alien in documentary. Daniel cry. Daniel has dinner. My sister is sociopath. Chapter end. The last book of his that I read was a learning experience for all of us, and I learned that if it bores me, I'm going to start skipping things. Okay, just a quick aside here. I was reading this chapter again to take screenshots for editing this video, and I found out he has another sister. Further on, I only say Daniel's sister, like his sister, referring to Joanna, who's mentioned about 50-ish times, and stops getting mentioned about chapter 18. Afterwards, she's just never mentioned again. But he has another sister, an older sister, called Christina, and I never noticed because she's mentioned twice in the entire book and never gets touched on again. I don't think she ever has any explained reason for her disappearance or anything. I think Greg actually genuinely completely forgot about an entire character that is a family member to the main cast. Like, he just forgot about her and didn't think to just remove it from the book, which is astounding to me. Reading this chapter's name, I'll be honest, I was a little scared, and I should have been, for different but as justifiable reasons. This chapter introduces a character named Mara, who exists for a whole chapter and is described thusly. Attention all audio listeners, please tab back into the video now, as the following section requires a visual aid. So yeah, this is how he describes her, and ignoring how unimpressed he is, this character seems to be the catalyst for us to see how perverted his friend David is, which we already knew. But it just needed to be reaffirmed, as then we could get even more space on the page dedicated to how much Daniel respects women, which is quite the contradiction, a word I don't think Greg understands, seeing as Daniel, despite not caring for sexualizing women, can't seem to stop bringing it up every second. It then once again just hard cuts mid-paragraph from explaining the logistics of people staying at his house to a bully yelling at him in the present, at least I assume the present, which he courageously ignores because of his moral superiority, while also exclaiming how obviously his actions reflect a poor home life, just ignoring that child protective services exist, and he could call them. Because he's so morally fucking superior. Another sus chapter name, but I'll let it slide this time. I wrote that joke about the CPS before reading this chapter in which he mentions them in relation to Philip, but with absolutely no self-awareness in relation to what's been happening in the previous chapters. Can't win them all, guys. Or any of them. I guess having people offer to act as editor for your book for free was too much work. Big man's getting upset. Daniel starts this chapter contemplating on the essence of water, or some such liquid, it doesn't matter, going into the nature of existence itself, until his sister rudely interrupts him, which annoys him. A totally acceptable reaction, because he was on the cusp of creating a cure for death itself, which other people would totally know and respect, because other people can read your thoughts. You dick. This chapter had the potential to be interesting, but much like the rest of this book, I hate it. That's not a joke, I just hate this book. There's a sentence laid with so much irony it would just immediately combust a lesser being, and then just moves on to the thing of this chapter, which is Daniel defending a kid called, whatever, who gives one, from Philip, the bully. Fuck. Don't bully me. I'm so sexy and tall. Daniel uses the term hero complex, which is a strange amount of awareness coming from Greg. But I'm not sure if he understands it, because a hero complex is a bad thing, generally, and Daniel does the right thing. So he goes and defends the kid because, I'm paraphrasing here, he's above average height, in case you didn't catch that the first time. And also his mum taught him how to fight, which is a stunning convenience because it doesn't match her character in the slightest. Another fact you may find similar if you remember some part of my last book club, where I didn't have these banging glasses and sick chain, where his mother in that book was essentially the same character, except she was dead, and also had the same main character, who was also taught to fight by his mother. So I'm seeing Daniel less as a new character, and more a reincarnation of a long line of losers, which includes Daniel and the other one. It would take 15 seconds to find out his name. The book is right, I can physically see it, but let's not pretend either of us care. And if you're still wondering, no, they don't fight because the bell rings, which is unfortunate because the only two outcomes of that fight would have been, 1, Daniel wins in spite of Greg's complete ineptitude in writing fight scenes, or 2, he gets his shit rocked, which just makes him go cry in the bathroom or something, and just saying that out loud makes me all warm and fuzzy. Any fun this chapter could have had is ruined, so Daniel and David go and shoot a dead fish, and then a dead body shows up in the creek, like the name of the book. Oh no, gang, it's a dead body. Zoinks! Jinkies. Fuck. There's some stuff about it, then he just goes back to school, fights Philip, winning thanks to his training from his completely average suburban mum, so she probably just said, like, hit him in the dick or something, I don't know. This chapter ends with him acting all high and mighty, getting sassy in response to Philip's whiny and pathetic remarks, which would be like a sense of relief mixed with foreshadowing in any other book, but because it's Greg, it's just meant to be a power fantasy, ending strangely with, "That was the last time I spoke to him before he died weeks later." If this was any other book, I would think it's hinting at some kind of like childhood innocence or something, and like sheltering and like harsh realities of being an adult, or something like that, like the end of Stand By Me, or something else Greg probably stole this idea from. But it just reads like Greg seeing this as the ultimate victory. Like he got the last laugh and Daniel proved his superiority and Philip had to die with that knowledge anyway. Next chapter. I would like to rename this chapter, Whoops, Greg can't use death as a narrative device. Again, Philip's not even cold yet, and Greg just parades him all over the pages with phrasing such as causing him to rapidly cease existing in the world as we know it. A kid fucking died in a horrific accident. You can chill on the big brain energy for 1 second, and as abruptly as the book starts talking about Philip's death, it stops and immediately transitions back into Daniel's slumber. Alien time. And while I relish in the chance to proceed with the main plot so I can stop fucking reading, the tonal opposition of that first page really does throw you off. Like watching Moana, then having 30-second clips of the lighthouse randomly spliced in with no acknowledgement. While passively reading
Actually, I think
you
I'm
don't
just gonna
you
restart.
don't have time to analyze anything. It just hits you like a flashbang, which is a pretty big insult, honestly, because the rest of the chapter it distracts from is significantly less interesting. He vaguely compares the alien to a special ed kid at his school, which should be foreshadowing, but because Greg wrote it, it's Daniel just knows stuff. He yells at them, poorly describes an out-of-body experience that will be a reoccurring theme, and then just stops talking. Cool. This exposition sucks and there's no payoff. I just want this book to hurry the fuck up. The out-of-body experience from the last chapter was supposed to indicate that Daniel is now extraterrestrially affected, a fact you might not know if you didn't read the book, or even if you did. It's not described very well, but it is in chapter 8 where we begin to see the slow burn of what is to come. Like too slow.
Sorry
Like
about
nothing
that.
happens. Like leaving the stovetop on while you wash your hands in the sink right next to it, and whoops, now all the koalas are gone. This chapter begins with Daniel rising from a slumber at school for some reason, because fuck continuity. David says whatever to him, blah 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 blah, grammar mistake. Dude, yes! Daniel notices a small glow down a nearby hill, so he has this plan to investigate. That's too much credit. He has an idea. He goes to play kickball with David and let the ball pass him so he can move backwards slowly without raising attention and get close to the glow. Which raises the biggest question here. Why fucking bother? No one's stopping him. David doesn't even need to be included, and even then, David ends up rocketing the ball directly into Daniel's nose, which is, even in a book with superpowered individuals, the biggest threat Daniel faces, and leads to him getting up and wordlessly drifting towards the glow anyway. Ah, 3 pointless paragraphs? You shouldn't have. As Daniel gets closer, he finds the source, a dead deer, which he then turns around, smiles with his teeth covered in blood because reasons, faints and smacks his head against a metal fence, and the only way to make this event not entirely contrived is to have this just kill him, which is what I want, but you know, fuck it. Daniel goes home and fucks around with some dead animals for like 2 pages, and then there's a whole section. It's being worded so strangely, I genuinely got confused as to what the point of the section was until I realized there probably isn't one. It's spring break, and Daniel is planning to spend it doing nothing but playing Final Fantasy VII, which he says he has invested about 24 hours of combined gameplay into this game. Firstly, that sounds really weird, like to read, so gameplay should have been replaced with like 24 hours of combined playtime into this game. And secondly, combined with what? You wouldn't say I have a combined playtime of 172 hours in Dark Souls 3. You would say I have played 172 hours, which brings up the issue that things that are supposed to be small, innocuous lines are written so fucking strangely, it just smears across the entire paragraph, and sometimes the chapter, making it hard to discern what I'm supposed to be paying attention to. Daniel gets interrupted by his mother, who is expecting a friend who she warns Daniel by describing her as fragile, which is strange terminology for a woman at best, made infinitely worse by the fact it was written by Greg, who's been diagnosed with the terminal condition of not being that great at describing women. I am heavily understating that, but it's not the point of this video. Just look it up. It's the reason this bitch is fragile, or whatever the fuck Greg says, is because she's pregnant. But Daniel sees a glow in her stomach, which means that child is kick-flipping in heaven, and she knows that. Daniel's mother knows that, and I know that this isn't important. Anision, serial describer of women and their problems. It's after they leave that Daniel just starts doing the thing again where he rambles, spouting some weird ideology shit that sounds suspiciously like it's being written by a completely different person who is several decades older and is named Greg. It's dream time again, where the alien pulls out his eyes. Who gives one? He wakes up bleeding, and then they go to the ER, where he goes full on, can I speak to the manager? Saying that the wait time is long because he guessed chest bleeding wasn't a huge priority and saving his life isn't on the doctor's mind, which isn't how doctors work, and isn't how an 11-year-old would think. And judging by the fact it's been 4 hours and Daniel is alive, there probably isn't that big a rush, considering it's called the emergency room, where people commonly go when they're dying, which, say it with me, Greg, is a bad thing, and we don't want people to die. Yeah, that's right, empathy training. I think that's more important than Daniel's superficial wound. I almost said Greg, and I really hope he knows that. The doctor grandstands to him about, and I'm not fucking with you here, self-harm, because that's what a professionally trained doctor would assume is what's happening to an 11-year-old. Because reality be damned, Greg just really likes his characters to be unjust victims to such an uncomfortable degree. I'm surprised he was even able to finish this book while climaxing every 5 pages. Anyway, as they leave, there's a horrendous car crash where some stuff happens, and the dude that hits them gets out of the car and he's like, oh my god, are you guys alright? And Daniel, in his baseline delirious state, just points to the dude's girlfriend and just goes, she's dead. A few times until the stepdad tells him to shut up, which was the power fantasy for me personally for this entire book. I really want someone to beat the shit out of Daniel. Just really bad. Just like... Ah, yes. Chapter 11. Awake. That thing that I wasn't while reading this book. This chapter starts with Daniel offhandedly mentioning that a few weeks ago a teacher died of a heart attack, mid-class, and we're also given the narrative whiplash of finding out Daniel's mother has previously beaten him with a belt, and it's written like we knew that, which we very much didn't. Then something magical literally deletes his mother's eyeballs. She falls unconscious, bleeding profusely from her eye sockets. Then her eyes come back. He goes to school. Surprise, the special ed kid is actually the alien. Surprise, the alien did the eye thing because she was a threat. Surprise, Daniel pisses his pants. Next chapter. He has a dream with a naked woman that this stuff. Nice work, Greg. Daniel's 11. Just a reminder. He's awoken by the alien in kid form outside his window because he's sleeping with a metal tinfoil and is therefore protected in his dreams, but then he gets like mad abducted with his limbs mad detached and then mad not abducted anymore because Greg is an excellent author. Then while he's at the urinal, he hears the alien again, gets pinched in the neck and slams his head into a yellow tiled wall. Why did this need to happen in this exact location? This chapter is relatively uninteresting, as are most of them, but there's some seriously fucked up stuff that I will have to be brief with for my sanity or yours. This chapter is randomly now in Ohio with Julia, who was mentioned at the start of the book and is a woman, so a little worried. Now in the first draft of this script, I called her Julia, but later changed it to Julie, and I wasn't sure why I got her name wrong so many times. I know that there's only a letter difference, which is easy to mistake, but I just thought I was being this idiot using all this magniloquent language, and I couldn't get a single character's fucking name right consistently. But as it turns out, I wasn't getting it wrong, Greg was. Julia is referred to as Julie all the fucking time for no reason. It isn't established as a nickname, nor could it be one because it's basically the same name and that's not what a nickname is. At one point, in a short sentence, he goes from Julia to Julie, back to Julia. There is no distinction between when he uses them. It's not like he says Julia and thinks Julie. No, Greg's just a fucking lunatic. I'm going to call her Julia. It is also in this chapter we get concrete information on just how much taller than average Daniel is, saying that Julia is 5'1" at 4 years older than him, which is just below the average height, completely reasonable. But Daniel, again, at age 11, is 5'10". For context, I'm slightly taller than that. I'm not tall as in you would notice it, but it's a bit taller than the average adult population in both Australia and America, but still within the plausible range, which makes sense because I reached this height when I was an adult, which is how age works. Daniel is almost as tall as me, at the same age as Daniel Radcliffe was in the first Harry Potter movie, where the average height for an 11-year-old is around 4'8". Fictional Daniel is taller at age 11 than Daniel Radcliffe is now. Imagine someone who looks like this being about the same height as me. So for his super serious supernatural thriller, Greg seems to be following the same logic as anime, which is still somehow an insult, because Jotaro, being 6'5" with cheese wheels for shoulders at age 17, is somehow more believable. Back to the part where Greg writes women. She's also a minor, I should point out. Daniel and Julia know each other through church, which gives Greg another opportunity to start rambling again. Okay, Grandpa, it's time to take your medicine. Most of this chapter just consists of Julia aggressively flirting with Daniel. Whoops, slip of the tongue. And this eventually devolves into them, Funky Town shenanigans, which is way too much, like I'm going to throw up too much, and there's no meaning or importance to the scene. It is
Screw it, I'm going
just
back to
perverse and grotesque, which Greg has
I
actually
can't,
defended
I
by
can't.
saying this
I'm
situation
trying.
is based off something that happened in his life,
I'm not
which
getting
is
very far.
cool
Not
with a
getting very
K,
far
but that's
at
not a
all.
defense, and doesn't explain the extent of the relationship,
I just hate
much
that
less the,
eraser tool so
superpower
bad.
part. Also, the chapter ends with
It sucks
the
so
plane ride
much.
home was a cold one, with plane spelled incorrectly. And I know that is the least damaging critique of this chapter, but it still counts.
Okay, yeah.
In this chapter, things get batshit nutstown insane, which is excellent because we're halfway through, the perfect time for the first interesting thing to happen. Anyway, he stabs the disguised alien in the neck with an in-flight fork, and it just kills him. Which I would argue somewhat devalues the potential threats to Daniel if mass-produced silverware is enough to score a flawless KO. But what do I know? I'm only human. He goes home and gets abducted by some other aliens or something.
Make it
Oh,
one.
fun. And he starts exploding their heads with his mind. Also, he can fly and is immune to the aliens' teleportation powers or something, and can astral project. So he's basically God now with literally no foreshadowing. I don't leave anything out, this just happens. Greg's just ignoring logic and writing random gibberish, which is why the halfway point of the book is not halfway through the video, since the random time and location jumps start to happen a lot more frequently, and things generally stop making sense. So I'm going to skip some stuff. It has been 3 long years, and the aliens have stopped interacting with him. He's mastered many abilities, even manipulating reality. Nobody questions him. His test scores are always perfect, even when he's not paying attention, because he's so aloof. And Julie is the perfect woman, who gives him
Yeah,
Bazinga when he wants it and doesn't bother him when he's busy. Ignoring the blatant misogyny there, which is a little difficult, despite skipping 3 years into the future, there hasn't really seemed to be any character development. If anything, it's character consistency, because Julia being his obedient woman, him being right all the time, having the power of Deus Ex Machina, and people leaving him alone is exactly what was happening several chapters beforehand. But as it turns out, writing a perfect Mary Sue character leaves little headroom for growth. Who would have thought? In this chapter, he's in PE and a disguised alien shows up. He cuts off its ability to breathe in some abstract way, and shit starts happening that Greg barely tries to explain. He postulates on the nature of and the society of these aliens with no evidence. He just says it, and then the chapter's over. Every day is a blessing. In this chapter, he tells David with words to fuck off and tells 2 teachers with his mind to leave the room. Their only defining traits being their considerable assets, which is so important to him, he brings it up twice in the 2 paragraphs of the book they actually appear in. His family rightfully doesn't like him. He tells Julia he's a god, flies to her house. She's in nothing but a bathrobe because Greg... And then they both get shot. Fuck yeah! Apparently Daniel isn't dead, and I still can't leave this nightmare. This whole chapter is somehow stranger than the last, since as things become more complex, they become more vague, due to Daniel's powers and the fact that Greg struggles to write basically anything, especially superpowers, in any way that would give the readers a general understanding of what's happening. Or like when it's happening, or if it's real. He doesn't really care. I mean, this chapter starts saying Julia was shot through the neck and bled out while all he did was stab. It takes a short while to bleed out, even through the neck, but in terms of chronology, this part only takes like 1 or 2 seconds, which is weird. And also, the last chapter ended by saying the bullet passed through Daniel's neck and into her forehead. But Greg is so caught up in describing the light leaving her because he probably thought that was so cool that he stopped paying attention to his own fucking book. I am now going to read an excerpt from this chapter so that you can see what it's actually like to read this unless I die halfway through, which is entirely possible at this point. Daniel's so powerful he might just kill me through the book. Time for punishment. The assassin was pinned against the wall, blood leaking from his ears to match his polka dot suit. Red and black. Ridiculous. Julia's soul moved in the slowest of motion, almost as if she was sticking around to look into her own eyes, to see her own dead body, just like you hear all those stories. We love to look at ourselves as we leave, almost like one final goodbye. There were creatures all over Earth, just like the ones who took me. Only these ones hid in human skin, and it was time for there to be none. Okay, so the best I can say about that passage is, I did in fact recognize the words. As a sentence, less so. For one, it's not made clear if Daniel is pinning the assassin against the wall, or like it's some other kind of force. How does the blood match a red polka dot suit? Something that is mentioned as if we have heard it before, but I actually think Greg forgot to do that on a previous page. We love looking at ourselves as we leave. What the fuck are you talking about? This is the first time it's happened. Then the rest of the passage is basically just gibberish, like it's not even comprehensible. Also, he resurrects Julia, gives her powers, or something, because he can't bear losing her, which makes sense, because seeing characters develop over time is boring. And if there's one word I would use to describe their relationship, it's doubt. Love. It's love. It's definitely love. Also, they Bazinga again. Put that one on the counter. Bam. Daniel also redesigns the entire human race, and it's only after Julia's counseling that he thinks, maybe eugenics bad, and resigns to a more simplistic measure, like balancing the genders, which is like low-key eugenics anyway. Making fingernails as strong as steel, because that was obviously the human race's weak point, are brittle fingernails, and gives all parents and children the innate ability to know where each other are, to stop abductions, which isn't necessarily how abductions even work, but even then, what about stepchildren or adopted children? Man, Greg really doesn't think too hard when he writes, huh? There's also this line shown in full because I don't know what the fuck that means. As is probably obvious from the chapter name, this is about coming home. What I wasn't expecting was for Daniel and Julia to return to her house, because I didn't actually know they had left, but it is mentioned in the last chapter. Kind of. It just says like, hey, we bounced, where they have the type of conversation an incel dreams about. Dude, just say that they talked into the night, completely engrossed in each other and their company. I can assume they love each other because the previous paragraph, and also the fact that they slept together. Julia is 18, Daniel is 14. Why am I saying this? Who knows? It's clearly not relevant. The only other mention of a place is some cabin. Like, where the fuck did they go? The reason I'm talking about this insignificant detail is because I'm delaying the inevitable, like death and copyright strikes. When they return, they have dinner, and Julia's father has some choice words. He's a dick, is what I'm saying. What did you expect? He's a character in Greg's Fantasyland who isn't the protagonist or anyone he's sleeping with. Of course, he's the devil. He makes a comment about how women have teeth on their crotches, which is a change Daniel made because, as he says, I mean, men have their swords, women should have their blades too, right? Which isn't remotely comparable. Oh, also, as it turns out, Julia's father, who doesn't have a name, is a serial predator, having attacked Julia's friends in the past, and as soon as Daniel realizes that, he just dies. He mentally alerts the nearest paramedics for the sake of Julia's mother, because he's already dead. Also, she's not given a name. He just spawns a coffin and some compensation money for losing the breadwinner, which is kind of sexist, but whatever. Then he just leaves. And I could tell you about the rest of the chapter, but how could I possibly top anything I just said? This one's special to me because it has absolutely nothing to do with what's been going on previously. It's basically like a filler arc in a book that don't have filler arcs. Daniel finds a bunch of dead women, discerns they were killed by Gary, then murders
Gary
him
Busey.
and his associates in such a way that really doesn't try to hide how this whole book is literally just an excuse for morality porn. Basically, Greg's writing this as an outlet because of his frustration of how wrong and unjust he deems the world to be. And if he had unlimited powers, this is how Greg would fix it. And the reason I say that with such certainty, it looks like I'm tempting fate, is because every choice Daniel has made is, in effect, harrowing. Daniel basically anatomizes Gary. It is horrific, and he describes his screams as sounding like justice, which is mighty fucked up, and I'm moving on now. Oh no. This chapter is a little hard to explain, like a condensed version of the whole book, because while there are some bygone events that have this issue, almost every sentence in this chapter only works if you don't question anything said or interpret it logically. So basically, if you just don't read it at all. Daniel gets /TP to some barren creviced void where an angel appears before him, aware of his powers, making this the first overarching plot-related development to occur in around 5 chapters, which is a fifth of the book. Settle down with that light speed pacing you got there, Greg. I don't want to enjoy myself too much. Plot twist, except not really, because it was basically never established, but the angel is actually Death. How did Daniel see through his disguise? He just did. Death explodes him with lacerations or something. Then Daniel, now in several parts, shoots blood into Death's skull, letting him see into Death's mind. Whatever. Then he creates a new material that can contain Death itself and flattens him like a trash compactor, turning him into like a marble. And no, it's not just you. None of this makes any sense. The only thing close to being done in this chapter is my fucking patience. With Daniel's newfound information, he determines God is evil himself. Not through like apathy or something, God is actually just a dick. Every crime, every tear that fell, it was caused by God. He had sent Death to me. He had not been too busy to handle me himself. He was just afraid. Which is like a hardcore atheist's wet dream, but also determines that God isn't how we think of God, and it's instead like the son of someone else named Cull. Subtle. Who, unlike God, has no flesh and is... which we'll come back to. Also, apparently, God is in 3 locations, and Daniel has created a new body, because his consciousness is in the black stone in his head, and he just reforms his body, and says to him, like, clone, go kill God, and just rockets off to confront God 1, but not before a single tear rolls down his face, because I think he was, like, staring into the sun or something. I don't fucking care. The real Daniel, or as close as you can get, meets Julia at the God 2's location and gives her something he just refers to as the tools required, but she doesn't want to fight God, because only our handsome, above average height for a 14-year-old protagonist could do that. And then the chapter ends with the sentence,
There we go.
the body, or the clone,
Decent
had
concept
already
art.
concluded the first God's location.
I could color it,
I wanted to
guess.
beat him to the others. What the fuck does that mean? Something that I omitted that's in previous chapters, especially the last one, is Daniel referring to his ability to change things as to see behind the curtains and all that as code. And like most things contained in this book, and not contained in this book, Greg can't write things related to code in a remotely convincing way. It's kind of quaint and a little endearing, but also mainly pathetic. He refers to altering reality as changing code, which raises more questions than it answers, because to change code, you need to like stop the program, then change it, and then rebuild the entire thing. If anything, it sounds more like code injection, which I doubt Greg knows what that is, and the reason I'm telling you this is because the chapter starts off with Daniel teleporting and saying, location coding is rather simple, which means nothing. That is a non-sentence. It has no meaning. This chapter is him fighting the second god, and if you know anything of Greg's work, it is probably the fight scenes. Or as I should put it, the fight scenes? Daniel gets knocked on his ass by God before his clone slams into God with a body 5 times larger than before. Whose body is larger? It's not clear. You have to wait a page to find out. God tries to strike the clone, only to have his hand explode. That's not explained. He reforms his hand, wields a sword, and tries to decapitate the clone. who we are told is 5 times larger than before. So, like, almost 30 feet? How is the sword reaching his head? Is God tall as well? It doesn't matter, because he just freezes and disintegrates. Which, apparently that means it's clear that the clone has defeated God's second part. I'll be honest, Greg, none of that was clear to me. The clone heals him and relays information he learnt from God Part 1. The first God was informative. The reason you can't read my mind, the reason you can't even sense me, is because to defeat the first God, I had to operate in an entirely different universe of code. Daniel thinks to himself, I began to understand what the body, which is the clone, was talking about. Cool! I have no fucking idea what's going on, and I'm reading this shit. Basically, the clone has transcended the coding of the universe. That doesn't even make any sense in the story world, but now Daniel is just stronger. Again, I don't know how. We also get a flashback to the clone killing God one. Here it is. It's very complicated and extremely uncool, so you can read it if you want. The last God is teleported to Daniel, and the Daniels, I don't know, and there's no fight. God can't do anything because plot armor. They have a little atheist monologue. The clone spouts about how the devil isn't real and how if he was real, it would have been one of the first gods' halves, and if you killed halves in the... But if you killed halves, it's 2/3. That's not... There's 3 gods. That's not how halves work. The real Daniel chimes in with some biblical shit relating to the devil, who was God, because fuck religion, am I right? You know, like it wasn't the devil who was jealous of God's creations, it was God being jealous of his sister's creations, and he drowned them in the ark flood, and Cain and Abel spelled wrong. Oh, also the third God is dead. None of this is explained. I'm gonna go cry.
There we go.
The clone goes to
Basic
act
concept
as God, except better, because
of my,
it's Daniel and he's better at everything.
thing.
Daniel himself goes to teleport to Cull while making himself invisible. 2 ways Cull would be able to detect him. In possibly the least cool way
Also,
you
I
could
had
possibly
another idea.
describe sneaking up on the God of Gods, as
You
he
can
puts
do
it,
snake,
talking to Cull in his extremely human-esque
or-
body, which he apparently doesn't have. We learn that his daughter is dead. I think. It could have been mentioned, I don't really care. Making her weakened him.
Or actually, no.
Meaning that he made mistakes
No
making
new
God,
layer.
which he couldn't fix. And I guess that
Delete
rule
layer.
applies to gods or something? Even though it doesn't apply to Daniel, I don't fucking care. Apparently Cull is displaying his daughter's
Check that
code
color.
on the walls. Whatever the fuck that even means. Then he just, like, Daniel just, like, finds his daughter's code in the exact form it was before she died, whatever the fuck that even means, and just reforms her. Now this should weaken Daniel, seeing as the rule that was established 1 page ago should apply. But it doesn't. Begging the question, why didn't Cull do it? There is no established reason that would permit Daniel but exclude Cull, and I'm moving on now, because I want to be alive. Let me feel alive again, good sir. Please. Daniel goes back to
Go
Julia's and they bazinga again because the book wouldn't be complete
I
without
think I
it.
wanna do
Also,
Go
he's still
Snake.
14 and she's still 18, which is irrelevant. Who knows why I'm bothering to mention it? Again, Cull's daughter takes command, fixing the world as she sees fit, and bars Daniel from altering things further, giving him the location of some aliens from the start of the thing who were hired by God to find a weakness with the brainstone that was created by Cull's daughter or something. I am skipping this chapter. This chapter is short and just a where are they now section, I guess, if not just like a little bit brief. Unfortunately, something that is required for a where are they now is for me to remotely give a shit about the characters. These are not characters. Everyone in this book has a singular character trait, but they do not in any way motivate the actions of the characters, with the exception of Greg's self-insert. They are only there to generalize how Greg sees the world or how he wants it to be, so he has an excuse to ramble about his ideology for several pages. Daniel's sister allows Greg to talk about how much people annoy him. His mother lets him talk about how people who should love him don't unjustly. David is Greg's feelings that generally other people are cowardly, stupid, and misogynistic, especially compared to him. Philip shows how he thinks he is being irrationally targeted by people who are morally and physically inferior to him. God represents how unfairly mistreated Greg and how everything he does is right, but bad things still happen to him. Julia is, among other things I shouldn't say in a YouTube video, just there to make Greg feel cooler, which is literally this whole book boiled down to a single purpose, which is given away by the last chapter. This whole book is designed to make the author feel cool, young, and sexy, while also acting as self-validation of his own worldview. I could go on being hyper-analytical of all these things and the themes and the unintentional subtext behind the words, but you already know it's bad. In fact, it's Greg's worst book yet. At times, it's more illiterate than someone who can't speak English just guessing words. What I'm going to do instead is tell you how I felt after reading the book, because while objective analysis has its place, the book has a 1% reception on Google. There's not a whole lot of discourse about whether it's good or bad. This book made me feel, for the first time in a while, truly sad. Because this was not a story of a man on some BBC crime drama. This was made by someone who was real and genuinely trying to make something, but all I could think while reading this book and writing the script was, Christ, this is pathetic. It feels like a child pretending to be a teenager pretending to be an adult. But he wrote this when he was 32. I'm a little scared that something awful is going to happen to me and I'm going to become like that, and if I do, put me down. So that seems to be the end of my script. I don't know if I have anything else written. Thank you to the fellas for supporting me financially. Thank you to everyone for watching this video. That is more than enough, but if you want to support me some more, you could become a fella yourself. You could buy my merchandise. There it is. This is the list of them scrolling right now. Hopefully this is good. Hopefully you guys like it. This has been in the works for a very long time for multiple reasons, but yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and shut down the stream now.
And I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
I mean, I guess it's lucky that that video just ended, but yeah. Gonna be shutting down the stream. See you guys next time I stream.